Complexity involved. In this module, we try to show how complex the decision making is when we think about bilingual education. So, because it is about complexity, it raises more questions rather than answers. It does not give specific answers precisely because the answers will depend on the context within which those questions are explored. So there is not one bilingual program that is appropriate for everyone. Rather, it is the context that will determine how will you try to adjust to those issues that I'm raising now. So we said before also that when we talk about bilingual education, it stands in a direct relationship with the community, not only with the local community, but also with issues regarding national integration at a larger level. So you're thinking of the individual, you want to bring in bilingual education because you're worried about the learning of the child and you want this child to participate at different levels. This involves community because you want this child not only to engage with a wider audience, but also to adjust well within the communal values. And it is a national issue because you don't want to create certain what we call ethnic enclaves where the community people cannot possibly engage with a wider audience at national level, because that would not be sacrificed at any cost. So the language policies of the state will somehow be reflected in the choice of the languages that you sort of make regarding bilingual education. There will be political factors also. There will be several communities which will be vying for their share of the languages within the education. We need to think about it politically also. And then we also need to think about global change and global factors. So even an individual, a small community in some remote area, because now with technology it is connected to the wider world, it cannot possibly ignore their presence. So given the communications, given the global village that we are actually living in, these things have to be kept in mind when we are choosing which languages to use in education. So this will influence our choice of languages. This will also somehow conceptualize for us what is the role of other languages within community. Do you want to bring in multiple languages, or do you want to sort of pick up a lingua franca that is there working at a regional level? This again is a choice that we make. And having said so, do we at a certain point want to have a transition where we move on to one language again? Do we also need to think about at what point which languages are to be introduced? When you're making these decisions at the school level, remember these will affect the life course of the child. So these are extremely important. So we don't make these decisions with a myopic vision. We need to think about which languages would this child need when this child moves on to higher education. So the why of what we are doing is extremely important. Constantly revisiting the rationale for our choices is important because we need to think of the exchange value of the linguistic capital that you are giving to the child. Now, although I use this term of linguistic capital borrowed from economics, borrowed from Bourdieu, but please also remember it's also a part of the identity of the child, identity of a community. It is ingrained in them as such, and we don't want to make a certain kind of choice that might infuse the identity of that child or that community per se with a certain kind of shame. Having said that, whatever decisions we make today are only today's decisions. Now, usually we do not actually respond to the change or the flux that comes in. And I'm not saying to revisit your language policy or your bilingual education programs every year, because that is also not practical. But the point is to keep in mind that the decisions that we take today are the best decisions that we take, keeping in mind the current situation. However, this situation might change 10 years from now, and then this would need a revisiting of what languages or what choices we have made. So keeping in mind that this is in transition, everything is in transition, is very important. Then when we think about bilingual education, then the issue arises regarding material development. Then when you are teaching, for instance, English, do you want to use English to teach the cultural values of the current society, or do you want to also familiarize the child with the cultural values that go along with the language that we have sort of brought in the country? That is also a very fine line that we need to keep in mind. So, and as I said, of course, this integration with a wider community of those who speak a language as natives need to be kept in mind, because you don't want somebody who knows the linguistic codes but cannot affiliate or cannot at least understand the cultural significance of the words that the person is using. So the nature of complexity that we revolves around allocation of languages, arrangements to be made, and the degree of flexibility one has, and what are the limitations within which we need to work.